You're listening to Speaking Side Mount, the podcast where we talk all things side mount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and side mount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top side mount divers. Whether you're new to side mount, been side mount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things side mount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet.
Hey, welcome back to Speaking Side Mount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is brought to you with the support of our brilliant sponsor X-Deep and the patrons of Speaking Side Mount. Huge thanks to both for their support, which makes all of this possible. Well, it's been a very busy last few months for me, and I was at last able to get back to teaching side mount diving, finishing a fundamentals course just a couple of weeks ago. If you didn't see it, there's a video overview of the course on the Side Mount Pros YouTube channel. Go to check it out if you're interested in a glimpse of how I teach side mount. Teaching again did raise a couple of really important points for me personally. First, how much I love introducing divers to side mount. As you know, I really do believe that side mount offers huge advantages over other configurations in most circumstances. I also am adamant that side mount should not be just another specialty course, but rather positioned as a gateway to other technical diving levels, be it decompression or overhead diving. So back to my course, it was so cool to be able to help aspiring tech divers to nail the foundations or fundamentals of buoyancy control, trim and balance, what I call relaxed static stability. This then becomes the platform to build good propulsion technique and also to layer on the skills such as line work for overhead diving. Teaching again also reminded me that your skills have a shelf life, and they will deteriorate over time if you're not practicing regularly. Due to COVID and my busy life and a myriad of issues, including the weather, I really haven't been able to dive as much as I normally would, and certainly would like to. I didn't feel any loss of muscle memory, but I did notice that the last mile of stability was weaker than normal. So the adage of practice makes perfect is certainly true, at least for me. I'm also super excited right now as I count down the days to my first overseas trip since pre-pandemic 2019. We're off to Mount Gambier in South Australia, basically Australia's cave country. And as you may remember, we did an initial trip there in 2019 with the intention of setting up multiple trips per year to support Kiwi, that's slang for New Zealanders, so Kiwi divers to train in caves and experience the wonder of overhead diving. So we're finally back to it, and I can't wait to be there with our group from Global Dive, hanging at the accommodation known as the Habbie, which is just phenomenal, with Darren Mitchell and Josh Richards. I'll cut at least an episode out of this trip, so look out for that over the coming months. And so on to this episode. During our various lockdowns, the whole dive community, somewhat out of necessity, has discovered live sessions, webinars, and I'm sure we've spawned a few more podcasts as well. For sure, it's kept many of us going as we've looked longingly out the window at the water, wondering when we could dive again. ADEX, or the Asia Dive Expo, has been super active, and one of their live sessions, I think it was back mount and side mount diving tips, caught my attention. I'm pretty sure Yvonne Press, my guest in episode 31, was on there, along with a few others, including Edmund Yiu. I thought they did an excellent job, and so I reached out to Edmund to get to know him better and learn some more. Edmund hails from Hong Kong and is a tech diving instructor to trimix levels on both open circuit and closed circuit rebreathers. He also teaches cave diving and is the Greater China regional head for the RAID Dive Agency. He's also a Divesoft Liberty instructor and a member of their ambassador team. In addition to teaching diving, Edmund also runs a successful dive distribution business throughout Asia, representing some of the absolute primo brands in diving such as X-Deep, Seacraft, Divesoft, and Ammonite. Pre-pandemic, Edmund has travelled the world with diving and has been a regular at many conferences and dive events. In this episode, Edmund and I get into the diving and teaching that he does and the diving scene in Asia. We talk about his involvement with dive agency RAID and some of the really cool initiatives they are implementing to shake up the dive industry. Edmund shares with us some on the Divesoft Liberty side mount rebreather and what in his mind makes it special. We then talk a lot about the business of diving, as Edmund describes his successful dive equipment distribution business. Also, this is Speaking Side Mount, so I ask Edmund to share some tips on what it takes to be a good side mount diver. Before, in a similar vein, we discuss where side mount sits in the hierarchy of dive courses and what it takes to be a good side mount instructor. All this and much, much more on this episode of Speaking Side Mount.
And we are recording. Edmund, welcome to Speaking Side Mount.
Hello, how are you?
Very, very good. Thank you. And I guess I should ask how you are as well. How's things in Hong Kong?
Well, we've been kind of locked down for the past few months, and we are technically not allowed to go out to do anything more than 2 people.
Wow.
So most of the shops are closed, and nobody's really diving at the moment. So it's a bit tough, but hopefully by April, they might be loosening a little bit.
Interesting to see the different ways that the world is dealing with the current pandemic. And we've been through our share of lockdowns here in New Zealand. With Omicron right now, we're about to open up a lot more, but we've got a lot of cases and we've got the highest ever numbers in hospital. Not that it's very big because we're a very small country, but we've got, I think, 1,000 people in hospital now, which is pretty big by our terms. And for the first time for a long time, we're having some deaths, which is really, really tough. I feel your pain right now because I was dry for a long period last year and it's not easy, is it?
Yeah, I think everybody is really tired of this COVID lockdown thing, and I think we need to move on. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people not believing in vaccine, and older people, especially in Hong Kong, and they end up dying and in the hospitals. And basically, That's what happened in general public. People are really not really scared. And I think having Omicron, the symptom has been, and most people are vaccinated. So it's just like a flu, kind of.
Yeah, all of my neighbors have actually had it and they have to isolate for a few days. And it's mainly coming from the kids, funnily enough. The kids are catching it at school and then bringing it home. And as far as I'm aware, all of the people that I know well, who are typically are younger and vaccinated, have all gone pretty well. I guess we can move on. I mean, everyone's struggling with it. I wish you all the best. Hopefully you'll come out of it soon. Let's get started by getting you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. I am from Canada. I moved back to Hong Kong 1997. That's when I started diving. It used to be like basically just for fun, and then just loved diving so much. And one of my goals was getting into technical diving. So I started technical diving like twin tanks pretty early, about more than 20 years now.
Let me ask you a question there for a moment. Sorry to interrupt, but how did you find out about technical diving? Because one of the things for me way back was I was diving for a long time without really even realizing that this level of diving existed. So how did you find out about it? Was that pre-internet days or?
Yeah, definitely pre-internet, or just, well, I don't even remember, like it's been so long ago. Back then, I can't really imagine how we lived like without like a smartphone or without internet.
Sure.
Like where, the old days we were using like modem dialed up for so slow, and that's about the only internet we know of. We couldn't dream of having internet in your palm of your hand or wherever you go. So, but the old days, I think I might have watched some books or documentaries or something on TV, and there are people like some explorations and cave diving. I think I always fascinated about cave. So it was kind of in the back of my mind that something I wanted to do. So I was really, really, really committed to diving in the early days, and I was already looking into nitrops and other things, and that's kind of how I got started.
When you started technical diving, you started twin sets, of course?
Yeah, back then there was no side-mount the way that we know it today. I think there were like side-mount people that we heard about in Florida, and people just kind of ad hoc type of side-mount. There was no training, no specific equipment, that kind of thing. But we started off twin tank. We do those stuff and back in the days. And then I kind of like it so much. Before, I used to work in a corporate environment, and then just diving for fun. And then after a few years, then we would just say, why don't I just become an instructor? And that's when I start thinking about, because my goal was, I was never really gonna want to teach open water, but then it's kind of, you have to go through that step. So I was pretty much a full trimix diver before I was actually getting into becoming an instructor. So that's how I got started. And then one thing led to another. Then, well, I kind of got laid off by the jobs. And then I said, why don't I start something on my own and doing something on the side? And so I start doing a lot of other things. And then here I am. So I run my own business for many years now. And it's just the type of lifestyle that I like, because becoming, diving instructors and travel around the world, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Yeah, it's one of the great things about diving. I mean, it's not necessarily lucrative, although you can make money in diving if you find your niche, I think. But it is certainly a great way to be able to meet a lot of people and travel in particular.
And you're doing something really fun, and also it's your job and it's also your hobby. So it can't ask for anything more.
Exactly. It's super positive, especially with a lot of negative things happening in the world. Hey, one thing that crossed my mind as you were speaking then is you were a trimix diver teaching open water. How do you think the technical skills that you had built contributed to your instructing in terms of being able to help people get started in diving?
Well, I think pretty much the way how I do things is I'm always into attention to detail. So it may have been too much if you start teaching somebody, like, but in terms of like technical diving, we have things and we like to standardize things, and we would have very specific way of doing things that, because it's try and test it. So it brings in a lot of sort of fine details and how you should do this, like clear your mask and how you get it done easier. And those things will really help, because you can give a lot of experience and suggestion to the brand new student, because you've done a lot of diving prior to that. And you can bring a lot of stuff to the table to your student that, meanwhile, what I think currently happening is we got far too many unexperienced instructors teaching, because the path to becoming instructor is very easy. And one thing, in 6 months to 9 months, and they're already teaching open water and instructors.
Yeah.
And what I see the problem is that they can't really teach the student anything more than what they were taught or by the books, like, or the paddy slates or whatever, because it's kind of like machine teaching, just blah, blah, blah. And that's it. You cannot give anything more because you actually hadn't experienced it.
Yes.
So I think for me, because I have well over 1,000 dive before I actually become an instructor, so it was kind of easy, because I've seen there, I've done that, and I've been doing a lot of diving different places, and you can tell them where you can see this, where I've been to, like, even tropical places, many people that wanted to go in Palau, Sipadan. I've done all those like long time ago, and then you can actually share a lot of your passion and experience to your student, so they know, oh wow, I want to do that, I want to go there, and they can ask you questions. You can always answer them, because they could bring out something that, I think you want as instructor that not able to answer any of your question other than what's in the book, then that sounds pretty bad.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And maybe we're, like, you and I are preaching to the converted, because like you, I was normoxic trimix. I think I was full cave as well when I did my instructor training and had been diving. I don't even know how many dives I had done, because I didn't keep a logbook for about 25 years. But I had been diving all over the world as well. And so I had a very similar thing. And I think there's a danger in being a higher level technical diver, and that you try to pass on too much information to your students. But if you can pair it right back to what are the foundations of diving, we talk about platform and trim and buoyancy and stability, and then we talk about some of the very foundational things. What is it that makes a good diver? I think as a technical diver, you tend to understand that, and it's built into your ethos and everything that you do. So if you can bring that to the entry-level divers, I think it's an amazing thing. And I couldn't agree more. The whole holiday diving and instructing does the industry a disservice. For a long time, I've maintained that we should set the standards a little higher for the entry of instructors. Yeah, I don't know whether that will ever happen. You don't want to set the bar too high, but at the same time, there needs to be a better level of instructor training, I think.
Well, I think we have already been doing it, because since I started joining Ray and running a lot of instructor courses, we're trying to incorporate a lot more of these more technical but essential skills for any divers. And then previously we're just lacking focus, like from the traditional big agency. And even back in the days, they make you do these stuff when during IDC. I say, why are we doing that? Kneeling down, we're doing stuff that was so textbook and do not actually make any benefit for a diver to actually what is diving and how to actually best enjoy it, including like buoyancy and trim. That I think probably the most important skill.
Yeah.
So I think our goal is beginning to realize, because we now have more control and we have instructor that we brought up a much higher standard, so to speak, that the way we like to see the industry is going.
Yeah, fair point. And you run RAID for China. So tell us a bit about your role.
Yeah, I cover the Greater China region, including Hong Kong, Taiwan, and China. So we are the franchise holder, for the region. So we have pretty much full control on bringing in instructors and instructor trainers. And to start with, we started small. We want to make sure that every now instructors have minimum standard, which is fairly high. And we built on something that we are doing everything. We try to do better things. So it's not like a fully mainstream and sort of direct competitor to PADI SSI, because we don't go that way. We wanted to create the divers that will continue to dive. And we have a good, smooth path where you can actually know exactly after you do the course, you have a very clear pathway for you. And we are able to provide, or at least to support all the instructor that where the student want to go. And we will have the program and capability where it take you where you want it, whether you want to do cave, you want to do something, technical or rebreathers, it's all there. So you will kind of stick with us. So also one thing I believe in is when you spend more time to kind of bring up the student, they kind of tend to stick with you, and they would sort of be more loyal, and also enhance. They will buy more equipment. They will do things and continue to dive and enjoy it. So we are never really looking at just cranking up the numbers, how many certifications. It's not really what we're after. We're after the student able to continue to focus and do things. And I think in the long run, it provides more better business for dive center and the instructor, because you can develop the student and there are more courses, which are, I would say, more money to be made, because there's the fact that in the low, open water, it's really competitive, the pricing. So we're never about dropping price. What we actually stand out is, our motto is, we will charge more for the course because we are providing you more. We're spending more time in the pool, in the open water, and it's the way to do it, because we can't compete with low end. You're just cranking up numbers and, like a factory. Whereas we can focus on quality. And start small. That's the only way to survive.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you again. And having seen both extremes there, where as we say, we go to some of the spots where you're cranking out students versus those that invest more fully in the diver from the beginning, investing not only in their diving and making them comfortable and feel good in the water. And that then leads into them wanting to dive more, which leads to them wanting to buy equipment, which leads to them wanting to progress their training to higher levels, which leads to more equipment, which leads to travel and trips overseas. And I can reflect on the dive center that I work with here in New Zealand, Global Dive, who, in my opinion, are one of the best technical centers, certainly in this country. And they just have this utter commitment to the people who come through at the very beginning. And you see them, you see young divers, irrespective of their age, progress through and moving through the levels, coming on trips and being assisted by the instructors on trips. I remember one actually being one of my students now, but I caught him when he'd done about 10 dives and I was leading a dive trip out to the Poor Knights Islands, and he was really struggling. So I helped him out on a dive and buddied him and helped him improve his buoyancy. And he asked me afterwards, how do I become a better diver? So I told him, and I don't know why I was surprised, but a few weeks later, I found out he'd been booked on some other courses, on some specialty courses, and he had done exactly what I had suggested he did. And then later on, he became one of my students. So it was actually a really terrific thing to be able to invest in him and see him progress. And now in New Zealand, I just announced today or yesterday that we're about to start running cave diving trips to Australia to help some of our divers progress to cave levels, because it's very difficult in New Zealand to dive our caves. They're very gnarly, very deep, very cold. And so they're really at extremely advanced levels. So being able to go to Australia and cave dive and offer a training path to our people here is awesome. So very similar philosophy there to what you're saying with RAID. Hey, one thing that came up with RAID as well is they're really shaking up the industry, I think, in terms of the business model. I know a while ago, I think there was free e-learning, but just last year, it was announced that there's now free membership or no instructor fees, which I think is awesome. Can you share a bit more about that and the thinking behind it?
Well, I think the idea was every time when it comes to year end and you have to renew your memberships and everything, everybody is dreading it, because even for me, for myself as an instructor, because I'm kind of in a conflict because I'm also kind of part of the agency. So I also collect some fees from the renewal. But in the long run, it's shaking up the whole industry. I think Paul Toomer, he had this idea, and then he just discussed with us and everybody, and everybody was like, wow, we've been thinking this is like something really good because we are shaking up the industry. We are doing something that's right. I think from the point of view, we are not really thinking just from the agency point of view. We're thinking from the instructor point of view, from the dive center point of view, that really going to help, especially during COVID time. Everyone's business is down, and then many people are not renewing. But there's only one other reason, because this is going to stay on and continue to be like this. Because what we want is the instructor who teaches, and they will still need to get certification. We would require the instructor to make, I think, 5 certification for the year. Otherwise, they will need to pay a fee and do a review or renewal course, because what we want is an instructor who teaches. And in the long run, it's better for us, for everyone. And charging a fee is, you're putting up a barrier, because why do people have to stick with an agency and they charge you a membership fee, which is outrageously expensive, and just to do business, and you don't have to pay for somebody for other things, and just so they can sell their product, right?
Yes.
So I think it changes the whole structure of the market in terms of the profit, because I think a lot of agencies are heavily based on the income on the renewal, maybe count for maybe more than 50% of their income. And when they're crunching the numbers, really just, not diving, for us, because we are small, every one of us are instructor, we understand the difficulty, we understand all the problems and things that we face, and we try to make it good for the industry, for the instructor in the dive center. So we don't make all the money, and while everybody is struggling and the agency is trying to, scrape up every bit and set money from everyone.
Yeah, spot on. Because I think certainly you don't choose to be a dive instructor because you think it's going to be a lucrative living for you. You're doing it more for the lifestyle and the passion and the enjoyment. And traditionally, dive instructors have really struggled to make a living. And many instructors come into the industry and then leave because they simply can't meaningfully support themselves. As you say, one of the big barriers has been the annual renewal fees. I mean, in New Zealand here, we really struggle because we have those renewal fees, which are, depending on the agency, some of them aren't too bad, but some of them are extremely expensive. And then on top of that, we've got a compliance obligation to the government where we have to register each year and pay a fee for that. And we've got medicals that we have to do. And once every 5 years, it's a big one. Or if you happen to be sick or have something wrong, you have to go and do a big dive medical, which is very expensive. And sometimes you need imaging. And to have all of this money go out the door, and let's not forget, we have to invest in our own equipment as well. And if you're going to be a good instructor, you should be investing in your own diving and training as well. So you've got training, you've got diving that you do, you've got all of these ancillary costs around trying to make a living. And then of course, as you say, if you're scraping the bottom in terms of the amount of money you can make from an open water course or whatever courses you're teaching, it becomes extremely difficult to remain in the industry. And therefore, you have this high tune factor and dissatisfaction. So I compliment you guys. I think it was a super interesting thing to do. And I think it was gutsy as well. And I'm sure a lot of instructors will have looked at it and would be very, if not tempted, will be very keen to join the raid team. So well done. And I wish you guys all the best.
Yeah, I think by doing that, we actually can choose for people to cross over, and we still maintain high standard and who is going to be able to cross over, because now it's not just number. We want quality instructors. We want to have instructors that are going to teach, and because that's our business, right? We have crossover instructors which they don't teach or they're really bad. That's not what we want. We're not making money from your membership. So it gives us more freedom to actually pick and choose who's the right instructor. And it's not like, oh, everybody just lining up and everybody just sign off and become a raid instructor. Our quality is still high, and our requirement of making the instructor or crossing over, we still need to check. We need to go into water, and you're going to have to see your skills. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's just cool to see that happen anyhow. So let's move on a bit. Let's talk a little bit about the diving that you do first personally, and then I want to talk about teaching as well.
I think COVID time, we was totally restricted really in terms of traveling, so I'm not able to dive as much as I like to. Only we've confined to in the Hong Kong area teaching. But before, I do a fair share of like recreational diving and then technical diving, wrecks and caves. I always love caves. So we travel around in China, or we go to Mexico, we go and run courses. So more at the moment, the type of diving I usually sort of part teaching and part fun, because to me, teaching technical diving or cave is super fun.
Yeah, agreed.
You get some of your expense cover. And then you can develop more students, and also you get to travel. And so this kind of mix for me now, because usually I always dive with some student of mine, and we're doing fun dive or instruct or doing courses. I also dive with friends, live aboard here and there, which is also fun. Yeah, I would say 80% of my diving is kind of do it for work. And then 20% is fun, but they're all kind of fun.
Yeah, I get it completely. Tell me about the local diving in Hong Kong. I mean, what's close to you?
Well, in Hong Kong, local water, we are stuck with poor visibility and not very much depth. So average depth is probably 20 meters or above. And the average is like less than 10, very shallow. There's some stuff to see, but nothing big. But that's what we have at the moment for most of the people who can't really go anywhere. But what happened during COVID was we had an explosion in actually local diving. So all the shops were doing well because there are a lot of new boats, because everybody can't travel, so they have to spend it locally. I also had a lot of students that decided to get into CCR diving because they now have more time at home and maybe some money left because they couldn't spend it anywhere else. So I actually set a pretty high record during this past 2 years in terms of how many rebreather courses I've been teaching and how many rebreather that I sold. So it was okay for me. And we are still really looking forward to actually go out somewhere deeper and clear water to actually do a real dive in a rebreather. So, but that's what I'm planning this year, hopefully in a few months.
For sure. So there's a few things that opens up for me. So when you do go looking for clearer and deeper water, where do you go?
My training usually in the Philippines, because it's close by. It's always guaranteed in terms of condition and depths. And we have a few affiliated dive centers that we are really good friends, and we go there. Travel is easy. The cost of the flight is, used to be really cheap. I don't know how it's going to be. So, I think this year has to be the last year for the COVID, because everybody's just so sick of it.
Oh, for sure.
Have to get back to normal, one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree. We're in the same boat. We haven't traveled. And it's interesting what you said about people spending locally, because we have a very limited number of tech dive centers here in New Zealand, but they've been just absolutely pumping the whole time that we've been open internally. And it's almost hard to get a booking. They've been so busy, and I have to ring up and beg, and it's only because they know me and we're friends that I get in sometimes. So a lot of that has been because the borders have closed. And of course, at the same time, people have money to spend. So it's been quite good that way. But I'm also excited, as I said, our borders are actually opening right now. So I think it's in the next 2 weeks that we are actually welcoming visitors back to New Zealand, firstly from Australia, and then later in the year, it's basically everybody. And we were really excited both about having visitors back to the country, but secondly, about being able to leave ourselves. And I mentioned the trip to South Australia for us. It's happening in the first week of May, May 1 to 7. Like you, I haven't looked at flights yet. I'm a little bit afraid, but I'm going to need to book my flight soon, and I just can't wait. Going back to what you were talking about, you mentioned caves. So you do your open water technical diving in the Philippines. What about caves? Where do you go for cave training and cave diving?
Usually I run the trip every year to Mexico because it's pretty easy and everything is there, all the facilities and shadow, and the conditions always good. And it's perfect for training, and also good for the student because they always wanted to go. And it's a good trip, sort of like a long trip, 2-week trip. And it's more just than a course. It's more like, wow, you see all those things. And it's like a holiday plus a trip kind of thing. We had cave in China, but the conditions are not so good and not so safe. So it's really difficult to run courses. They do have some cave in the Philippines, but again, it's on and off. Sometimes they're closed, sometimes they're not allowing people to go in. And during COVID, of course, we can't go there. Usually we take the long flight. Not
I
that
understand
much.
the attraction too, because it's kind of, there's lots of places you can go cave dive, but one of the things about Mexico, and I'd say the same thing for Florida as well, if you want to dive, cave dive there, is that everything's set up. And when you go to a sinkhole or a cenote, there's a nice timber platform at many of them that you can go and get set up, and there's car parks. You can get cylinders and fills really easily, and the food's good. It is very easy, isn't it?
Usually it's the logistic. You can all sort of lay it out and set up. Then it's pretty easy to do. And as long as you've done it and you know all the people there and you got some support local there. And for the student, it's the experience, the overall experience, and it makes them more passionate about, wow, let's do some more, let's do that.
Yeah. And you can imagine making that your first trip and then popping down to Thailand or to see Robin in Indonesia at Sulawesi or something, and doing some of those. I had a great chat with him a couple of episodes ago about caves at Sulawesi. I'd love to go and dive there.
I would love to actually check it out and see it for me, for fun, and also potentially it's possible to teach there and without too much hassle, because usually the caves in Asia, they are quite remote and they're not well supported, and you gotta sort of line up the logistics. So I would love to actually get in touch with those guys when things we are actually able to travel freely and start looking at some of those things in Asia. So what about New Zealand?
The challenge here is there are caves in the North Island, but they're not really diveable. We have a lot of farming here, and basically the good caves are dry caves and they're salted up. A few people have tried to dive them, but it's pretty gnarly. And then the South Island caves, the most famous one is the Pierce Resurgence, which Richard Harris and Craig Challen and Rick Stanton's dive there as well. And a bunch of Kiwi divers have too, but I know Harry and Craig last year or the year before took it down to 245 meters. That'll give you a bit of an indication of how that cave goes. So the water's very cold, 6 Celsius. The cave is very dark. It's black walled and it goes deep extremely quickly. So it's not for the average cave diver. And then the other thing is logistics. Those guys have a lot of resources, so they're helicoptering in gear, and it's a real expedition kind of experience. And so, for instance, what we have decided to do, I've been training side mount divers here to give them the opportunity to cave train and not have to cross the planet to Mexico or to Florida from here, or to Europe for that matter. That's where South Australia and Mount Gambier comes in. So they have just an amazing limestone karst area there. There's some brilliant sinkholes. Not a lot of caves, but there's Tank Cave, a very complex and brilliant cave to dive, which is shallow and has a reasonably easy entrance. That's a great opportunity for us. That's almost as close as going to the South Island for us anyhow. I don't know, have you been to South Australia? I think that's a really good option.
No, actually not. I would love to go. If you have any trips, then maybe I can join one of these.
Yeah. Well, we do. So here's some examples. So we've got May 1 to 7, and then we've got our second trip in July and our third trip this year in September. So that's how committed we are, and we've arranged all the local logistics through a dive operation there, Dive Experience. I'll drop you some info on the ones for maybe May's a bit soon, but for July and September, there could be some opportunities, because the Cave Diving Association of Australia controls access to the caves there, and they're very tight on that. There's a requirement to either get a visitor pass as a qualified cave diver, or you can do a crossover and then become certified with them. And either one's okay, depending on how you do it. If you do a pass, I think you have to dive with a CDAA diver. But I did the crossover, which was a lot of fun. It's a bit of a course and you pay for it. But I did mine with JDZ, who's one of the wet mules, a really great guy. And I've talked about it before. They put you through a stress test and you have to get in the water. And they talk a lot about cave diving and the local conditions and also the rules there. There's a lot of rules around access to the caves. And it's important you know those. But I just thought it was a great experience. And so either one of those is okay. Though a lot of guys just get a visitor pass, which is cool too.
Yeah, I love to try to do it in one way or the other. And I think when we start sorting out what our travel schedule going to be, if things start opening up, because I have a huge backlog of students and needs to complete.
Yeah.
And
Got it.
Especially when you're doing technical diving, and in Hong Kong, you can't really do any of that. You can't even go past like 20 meter to any sensible place that get some depth and actually do some proper training. Where are you based?
I'm based in the far north of New Zealand. Auckland is our biggest city, which is in the upper end of the North Island. But north of that is about maybe 400 kilometers of road that goes to the very top of the island. And I live near the very top in a place called Cooper's Beach in Doubtless Bay. And I came north because the diving's better up here. However, I have a whole lot of other businesses. I run a coffee shop and gelato shop and have some accommodation and being
Sounds like you're having a good time up there, because I love to actually be someplace like where you are, because in Hong Kong, we're in a city where everything is so cramped and tight.
Yeah. We have so much space. I mean, the biggest thing, even though we're a small country, we have a lot of space. There's only 5 million people in this country, and we're vaguely the same size as the United Kingdom or Japan. So there's a lot of room here.
It's one of the places that I wanted to go, and I'm actually never dove in New Zealand, but I think Four Nights is where you are.
Yeah, not far. Four Nights is about 2 hours south of me. Before COVID, I was going there roughly once a month on a liveaboard. There's a wreck up here called the Canterbury Wreck, which I was in the Navy and surfed on, so I dived that a lot.
In terms of more like suitable for deeper technical diving, where would you take them?
The Four Nights is a really good option. You can dive pretty easily to 80 meters there. There are some that are a little deeper again. There are some expedition type sites where we've got deep shipwrecks. So they're pretty gnarly dives though, but there's the Niagara, which is at 125 meters, and a few others, but they tend to be more expedition. There's a guy that I know very well here, Pete Mesley, who runs trips to those. One of the ones that I love the most, it's a shipwreck, not particularly deep, but the Mikhail Lermontov was a Russian cruise liner that was sunk in Marlborough Sounds after hitting rocks. And it's relatively shallow. It's on its starboard side from memory. And the port side's now at 16 meters, and the overall wreck wouldn't be deeper than 30 something, but it's a super gnarly, super fun wreck to penetrate. And it's one of our favorite spots as well. But deeper diving, if you're looking at doing those sort of courses, the Four Nights would be a really good option.
We have to organize a trip sometime to come and visit.
Yeah, yes. That would be awesome. Happy to support that or help you out with that. Let's move on a bit more about you. So we've talked about your diving and what you do, and we started to talk a little bit about courses and so on. So when you were talking about teaching technical courses, what range of courses do you teach?
Pretty much full range. So all the open circuit, full trimix, and also CCL, and on certain units that I teach mostly. And cave, not everything, but cover quite a bit. I always look forward to starting somebody like just the side mount courses and just the beginner. That's when you actually start to kind of groom the student and see where they want to go, and in the fundamental skill where they learn most of the essential skills. That's actually quite important. So I enjoy teaching like entry level technical course, because for them it's something, wow, I've never done this before, and it's like so much different than what they're used to. And of course, doing other deeper courses is also good for me, and it's fun for me as well. It's less work, I think, for doing like more advanced courses. Well, not less work, but I think it's more fun. Also, at the same time, when you're an instructor, you don't get to practice a lot unless you're teaching a lot. Then it helps me as well in terms of to teach, to develop my own skills, as well as, maintaining it. So I'm always looking forward to, teaching a course. Usually I'm more known as a sort of instructor, because I believe in sort of teaching people and with the right attitude, especially when you get into more technical stuff and rebreather diving. I'm not much of a sort of so-called explorer because I don't have much time to do exploration. And I don't really like to brag about, oh yeah, what's the deepest you've been with that. Yeah, then I'm like, to me, it's kind of contradictory to teaching for good student, because some people will look for, oh, this guy's been, wow, how much deep, and this is the deepest in whatever. And then they went to him and to take courses, but they may not be a good teacher. They might not give you the right attitude. So when you want to do this crazy dive, and I usually say, let's hold on a minute, let's get, that's usually where I'm trying to discourage them, and certainly not to take more risk than you can afford. So
yes, that resonates so much with me. There's a few things you said there, and one thing I remember talking to Steve Bogarts about this, which is the value of instructing in terms of building your own skills and keeping your own skills fresh. And there's no doubt if you're teaching, you are practicing skills a hell of a lot more than if you're not. And, a lot of technical divers do not do anywhere near enough practice on their skills than they should. So I think that's a really important point. And I remember talking for a long time with Steve about that. The other thing that comes out there as well is that Tom Steiner was my kind of mentor, who's in Gozo Technical and Gozo, and he has done some big dives in his time. But Tom is not an explorer, he's a teacher. And he takes a lot of pride out of being an extraordinarily good dive instructor at the very highest levels. That's his thing. He doesn't go exploring. He doesn't take risks in caves. He doesn't go deep anymore unless it's within a course confines. I can't remember who I was talking to on another episode where it's actually quite rare for people to be genuine explorers. I mean, we can reel off a lot of names of people who are, but they're not that common. Not everyone's an explorer.
But everybody would like to their image to be, oh, I'm an explorer, I've done this and done that.
Sure.
And they like to have that pose and be known for, and because it's something to brag about. But I'm more sort of low key, and I can tell you I'm not an explorer. You want to set some record, then you could do it on your own. I'm not going to take you for that.
Look, I'm with you 100%. And look, and here's the thing about exploration too. I mean, exploration is going out and finding something new and perhaps being somewhere that no one has been before. But when I'm diving caves, and I'm not an explorer, right? I'm a cave diver, and I'm not even a cave instructor, right? I'm a side mount instructor. So I'm very specific about what I do and what I don't do. I teach the introduction to technical diving, which is side mount diving, and I try to be the best I possibly can at that. And then I go enjoy that myself in cave diving, and sometimes I'm doing some deeper diving as well. And so the key to it is that every time I go into a new cave or go into somewhere that I haven't been a lot, I'm exploring for me. I'm finding new things, I'm discovering, and I'm experiencing new things. And I think you've got to be careful about falling into that kind of explorer trap of wanting to be like the Bogarts and the Rick Stantons and the Richard Harrises of the world. They're a very unique group, and they've chosen to dedicate themselves to that.
Yes, it's because when you're doing this type of diving, you are actually accepting a lot of risks and things, yes. and something that you probably should not be telling your student about.
Yeah,
I would say sometimes people have done things that they probably shouldn't have done if they were teaching or showing set the right way. But then you're accepting the risk because you are an explorer. So I know a lot of people that are just beginning, and they want to be like that. They want to take really, really high risk. And unfortunately, that usually end up with accident, and that's usually what happened. And we are getting a lot of unnecessary accident that could have been avoided, especially in technical and rebreather diving.
Yes.
So my role is trying to give you the right attitude. As long as you're on my watch, I'm not gonna make you take anything too risky, because I'm not really a big risk taker. I'm very genuinely believe in like good scale, having done that and do this, and it's manageable and comfortable even doing like big dive. But there are times that even for me, I have to come out of my comfort zone and try to do something too. So I would say I'm not so much a great experience in terms of doing crazy dives. So yeah.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, there's so much diving to do, without going super deep or without going 2,000 meters back into a cave or whatever. So I agree completely.
So let's talk a little bit more. You mentioned rebreathers and you mentioned that you've sold a lot of rebreathers and done a lot of training. And I know you're associated with Divesoft Liberty. And a lot of people know on this podcast that I have a KISS Sidewinder and I'm extremely biased. However, I know the Divesoft Liberty is a fantastic unit. I know a lot of super prominent world leading divers, including yourself and Steve Bogarts when he was diving, Jill Heineth. I mean, who else? Becky Kagan-Schott, Matt Givon, Gary Dallas. Could go on and on. There's just so many who are on this unit and teaching it. Let me ask you, why did you choose to dive the Liberty and what is it about it that you think shines in terms of side mount rebreathers?
I think it's the overall support that you get from Divesoft.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying Sidewinder is bad. A lot of my pals and guys that are into Sidewinder, and I will get into Sidewinder because I'm affiliated with X Deep very much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty much the very first distributor in Asia. And I've been diving, I've been doing X Deep for a very long time, close to 10, I think 10 years, more than 10 years now, almost 10 years. So recent acquisition with KISS, and they're developing new stuff. And I'm quite excited to see where Piotr is going to take the Sidewinder to, because I've seen it. I was in Poland in November, and he has a lot of ideas and what new develop, for the Sidewinder. Let's get back to the Divesoft. It's very robust, because it's electronic, so there's quite technologically heavy, but it's a marvel in terms of the design and reliability, in terms of what it can do. And the thing about Divesoft is their support, because they have probably the best of all the company in terms of support and parts and things that they keep on improving. And the team and the owner, it's just so good in making things that just super perfect.
Yeah. From someone from the outside, they seem extremely polished. And by that, I mean, when you look at their marketing materials and the videos, and that can all be smoke and mirrors sometimes, but it's very clear that it's not. They do a great job of supporting it, promoting it. And clearly a lot of work's gone into the development of the units and the manufacturing quality and standards and so on, that in the end creates a great unit. But I think when you wrap around really good marketing and really good support, it really makes it a nice product, I think, to be involved with looking from the outside.
Yes, but it might seem complicated, but actually it's pretty easy. And also, it's the unit that has never given me any really issues. It's been so reliable in terms of everything. And they thought of everything. And when you get into the detail, then you start, wow, you'll see all these stuff that they incorporate. And then, of course, the redundancy of the unit, because everything is fully redundant. Not just the side mount, just the Liberty, because it was developed first as a back mount unit, and then they kind of rethinking about the side mount unit, how it want to be. And the one thing that really stood out as a side mount unit, because when you dive side mount, I think the Sidewinder is technically not really side mount. I mean, you mount it in a side mount way, but it's kind of like a back mount design with the holes like that coming through. So it requires very sort of a lot of modification in your rig, and you have to have a complete rig specifically set up for it. Versus in the Liberty, you dive exactly the same setup as your open circuit side mount. Basically, you just clip on the rebreather unit as its own. So it's a completely standalone unit. So you replace it, you clip on the tank just like you would normally do. I use this exactly the same BCD with pretty much the same hose routing, except on the right side, I attach the rebreather instead of another tank. So to me, that is sort of more side mount, because I can detach it underwater. I can push it through. I can get it off the loop and I just push it through. And you want to go through like tight spots. That's what the advantage. I think the Sidewinder would be sort of fixed. You cannot remove it while you're underwater.
Yeah, you sort of don't need to. I trained with Ed Sorensen. Ed's told me he's been through some extremely tight places, and I did go through some restrictions with him. You take off your cylinder on the side, and what happens is the can that's on that side falls into the place where the cylinder was. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, it is quite a different approach to a side mount rebreather, and it's not traditional in any sense in terms of the rebreather being on your side, because it's not. The cans are sitting above your cylinders.
I see a lot of potential for the Sidewinder. I think the next couple of years, for sure, I'll be crossing over to Sidewinder. And I think it offers an alternative. Again, because when you're looking at the market, even buying a Sidewinder, the price is still a little bit on the high side for what you're getting. And the price they can sort of have the price more sort of lower, then we can have a huge amount of people want to get into it. So I have already people asking about, inquiring about Sidewinder courses. So it's for sure. Once they sort it out, the sort of manufacturing, and I'm pretty sure I will get into it. So
it's super nice to dive.
Yeah, for carrying it, traveling, it's really good. But because it's an MCCR, so it's slightly different than when you're diving fully redundant ECCR, which has so much into it. It's completely different.
Yeah.
And I think they complement each other as well in terms of the marketplace, because it's not like a really competitive product. You either choose this or that, right? Depends on where you're from and what you want, and also your budget as well. Because, if this is twice as much and that, then it's a different price category and also a different market.
Correct. Yeah, agreed. Interesting. I was going to ask you about XD. So you must have started a similar time that I did. I mean, I did my initial side mount training and cave training, and I was using the classic back then, what Patrick Widman now refers to as his pillow, the BCD part. It's been super fun going through that whole path from the classic to when the stealth came out, and now I've got, if I look over, I've got about 5 or 6 of them just sitting there that are all mine that I use for various different types of dives that I'm too lazy to change the setups on. Tell us a bit about what you do with XD.
Well, I'm the distributor for a big part of Asia. So we move quite a lot of volume in terms of XD. We cover China, Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia, except Thailand, but Malaysia as well, and Hong Kong, and the whole region. But we sell a lot of recreational as well, not other than Simon. I would say Simon accounted for about 40% of our sales, and I would say 50 to 60% on the back mount and recreational market. I think when we first started in the old days, it's just the stealth, and they don't even have the Ghost or NX or anything like that. It was a relatively unknown name back then. Nobody knows Simon. We were kind of asking, knocking on the door. People, you want to sell this, you want to carry this a product, but people are hesitating and they don't know what it is and blah, blah, blah. But they've done a really good marketing in terms of the image and the brand, and we are growing pretty much together, I think. And now it's become sort of pretty big name.
Yes.
I think it's one of the biggest name other than the big, traditional corporation, Aqualung, Maris, Scuba Pro, that kind of brand. But in terms of technical market, they are really well known, really highly regarded, and even recreational now. I will say, you go to Taiwan, pretty much more than 50% of people will dive Simon. You'll see it is in X deep. And also, if you go on every dive boat in Hong Kong, you'll see somebody's diving at X deep, BCD or Simon. It's getting to be really, really well known. But we're still small. While X deep is still pretty small. So it's good. Well, I talk to Piotr all the time, and we have a long relationship. So it's good working relationship because you're talking directly in contact versus if you're trying to sell some other brand, you get a sales rep from somewhere and then that's it. You can't ask for flavor. You cannot ask for things that they make specially for you, that kind of stuff. And so that's why usually my suppliers are mostly medium or small size. And European, a lot of European brands like Divesoft. I'm also now just working with Seacraft for the DPV, Ammonite.
Yes. I think you're choosing top shelf there though, aren't you? I mean, let's go through it. So XD, I'm clearly biased. I've been diving them for nearly 10 years. In my mind, it's the clear leader in the market in terms of side mount. I've been diving a Ghost for a long time when I dare to go back to single cylinder. And then in terms of DPVs, certainly Seacraft is right up there. And I think one of the things I struggled with, I travel a lot. And so having a travel solution for their battery would be really, really good. And it's one of the reasons that I didn't select their product in terms of DPV for me. But if they solve that problem, I think they're going to be a real player globally.
Yeah, we have issues with battery shipping. So I actually went as far as taking a course from IATA to be a dangerous good regulation certified, so I can actually ship and sign a declaration. Because
good stuff.
Nothing come in Hong Kong, but if I have to ship it out as a dangerous good, I need to have a license to be able to do that. So I actually just finished the course last week, and I'm now able to ship dangerous good. It's by law in Hong Kong. They require you the shipper to have a license. It's a well recognized from IATA, so it's something needed for the business. So just do it.
Yeah. I spoke to them ages ago because I was very interested in getting one. And as I said, we tend to travel to Truck Lagoon, for instance, and Australia, etc. And being able to take your DPV with you is kind of important. A lot of the places we want to go, you can't hire them, or you don't want to hire them if you've got one sitting at home. So I have a Dive Extras DPV, and the main reason, I mean, they're nice, but the main reason I got it was because of the batteries. We can put in power tool batteries, they run really well. But I do consider a little bit like looking at Sidewinder versus the Liberty. Seacraft is certainly right up there in terms of being the industry standard, and the batteries was the issue for me. If they came up with a travel solution, I think it would be amazing.
Oh, well, let's wait and see how things are. At the moment, I don't think it's too difficult to ship. As long as there's a flight that you can fly there, but you do have to declare it and you do have sort of license to actually able to ship it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wouldn't say pretty easy, but it's certainly something
doable.
We couldn't get past it. Even for like torches and lights, you can't really have big lights either when you kind of get on a plane. Especially in Hong Kong or where I am, everything that I do is traveling. And that's why I has been putting off doing scooters for the longest time, because the battery is always an issue. For anything that you want, the battery is going to be much bigger, and also lithium. Anything type of burn time of an hour, I'm not interested. Basically, pretty much because I see there's actually a market for locally, because people have been diving in Hong Kong locally, and also from China. There's people actually buying the unit for exploration, for whatever, military, for commercial. Well, there's a market, but it's a high-end market and it's expensive units. So we have to see, because that's usually my area expertise, so more focused on sort of high-end stuff.
Yes.
And I don't have a huge sort of requirement that I have to move like huge amount of units. And less stress for me, because when you're trying to sell a distributor for like Scuba Pro, Aqualung, that kind of thing, they want this, they want like a container every year or 6 months, and they just push you. For the stuff that I sell, they're pretty good in terms of not pushing me too much, and they usually exceed the expectation. And usually now XDeep, especially for XDeep, we always have a backlog of 2 months of order that never come, because we always went, where's my order?
Yeah, we have the same thing here, but I guess it's a good problem to have. So Edmund, we've been talking a lot about the business of diving, which I think is awesome and super interesting for me. But for a lot of our audience, they're side mount divers, right? And I know you're super experienced both in side mount and also in teaching diving. And I think I saw a few months ago you were on a ADEX panel talking about tips for side mount and back mount diving. So what would be your 2-3 tips for side mount divers, or those wanting to get into side mount, in terms of being a good side mount diver?
My tips, well, go see a good instructor for one, and dive it a lot for side mount, because it's something that you learn and you become a lifestyle for you. I would say the diving style for you. So for me, I dive side mount pretty much everywhere I go. It's like always have the same rig in my bag, and doesn't matter wherever I'm diving, recreational, tech, cave, or just fun dive, or just something. I always have side mount. I rarely ever dive back mount anymore. Of course, my preferable way of diving or rebreather is also side mount, because it's lighter to travel and it's just the freedom. I don't know about side mount, but when you're in a side mount, everything is you just feel so perfect in terms of the trim, your balance. So my advice for people who want to dive side mount is get a good instructor and do a proper course, and also understand that your instructor is a side mount believer and a diver that does it all the time. Not somebody who just had a side mount instructor certification, because there are a lot of those around that they don't actually know how to dive side mount properly. And dive a lot of that.
Yeah, that's spot on. Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to PJ about this quite a while ago, about one of these goals that I have, or one of these things that I'd love to see, is that we lift the standard of side mount instruction. You talked a while ago about lifting the standard of open water or entry level instructors, but I don't think it's right that you should be able to, as an open water instructor, become a side mount specialty instructor so easily. I think it should be positioned a bit more like, I can only use a TDI example because that's what I know, but there's intro to tech, which is where you begin to dive 2 cylinders in back mount. I see side mount at that same level. You've dived a bit of single cylinder back mount and you've got into diving and you really like it. And now you want to go a bit deeper. You want to go a bit longer. You want to go into overhead environments where you need redundancy. Now it's time for you to have 2 cylinders. And so you've got an option of going to back mount twin set if you wish, or you can see the light and dive side mount. And so you've done some diving and now it's time to go to this different configuration. And I feel it should be positioned at the beginning of technical diving.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because I think for me, when I teach the side mount course, there is no such thing as a recreational or technical course. It's just one course, and you learn everything pretty much an intro tech. And you have the exactly same configuration as you would be pretty much diving to do cave, but you start with the basic. That's when you learn how to properly adjust your rig, because having everything adjusted is so important on side mount. And then work on your fundamental skills, because a lot of time people get into trying to learn side mount, they actually want to learn a lot of stuff, other stuff like finning, like buoyancy, like trim, like all those things. So those are part of the course. So it's a much more difficult course when you're doing a course from me or from Ray, because even for me, for people who are crossing over, if they have a side mount certification or instructor certification and they want to automatically cross over, I would say, no, you have to actually show us and do what we require, because we have actually a lot more stricter requirement for what a side mount instructor should be. And when you have working with a small agency and you have some more control, then I think that's where the difference can be, because when you are in big organization, you can't really control what the instructor is going to be. But when I'm with Ray, I can control every single one of our instructors to have pretty much the same skills. And it's good for them too, because they will show up, people can see them, wow, they look so good in the water. And they believe in it as well. So
Yeah, and you've got some amazing role models. I mean, there's yourself, of course, but PJ Prinsloo, Gary Dallas, Steve Lewis. I mean, these are people that I've had as guests on Speaking Side Mount as some of the premier side mount divers in the world. So that's pretty cool.
It's great to be with Ray, because you see all the guys and they are like really good guys, and all the people that we think very much alike as well. And we're always good friends, and it's great for me to actually know so many people now around the world, and they kind of, they're Ray, they're part of the family. And it's one of the biggest feeling when you join Ray and become a Ray instructor. You know everybody, and you can talk to everyone as you were friends, and you can make a lot of difference in terms of what you want to change, what you like to see. And you feel that, because surprisingly, a lot of them are tech divers and really good tech divers. And although we try not to be fully tech, we like to think we are kind of like a complete agency where you can go from zero to everything, and we will take you there, and we have the expertise and the knowledge and can get you wherever you want to go. It's a nice little agency.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Thank you. And I really appreciate it. Edmund, it's been amazing to catch up with you and meet you at least partially face to face. Hope we can for real sometime when travel is able to happen, and whether that's in Mexico.
When I know you, for sure, I will come pay you a visit. Maybe we'll do some diving and bring some people over.
Brilliant.
And run a trip, because it's certainly interesting. It's always want to know and visit so many new places. Also because I'm on the Divesoft Liberty ambassador, so we met everyone, great divers, and a lot of things you can learn from them. And also they also kind of like me, because they run the show, they run the shop, they can do the local diving. So all of a sudden, a lot of places I wanted to go diving that I've actually never done before. So it's great. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much. And we'll catch up again soon, huh?
Okay, sure.
Cheers, Edmund.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for joining me on this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was great to meet and catch up with Edmund and talk about the diving that he's doing in Asia, about his teaching in the region, about RAID and what they're doing to shake up the dive industry. And of course, we couldn't miss out on side mount rebreathers, looking at the Divesoft Liberty as well. Thanks again to Edmund for joining us. Thank you so much to XDeep, our great sponsor, and also to the patrons of Speaking Side Mount whose support makes everything that you've been listening to possible. If you'd like to become a patron of Speaking Side Mount, then pop over to patreon.com/speakingsidemount to check it all out. And also, if you're interested in the fundamentals of side mount diving, don't miss out on my Side Mount Fundamentals ebook that's available through the Side Mount Pro store, www.sidemountpros.com. Thanks again, and I'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Speaking Side Mount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, then let us know via our Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Speaking Side Mount.